Hello, MotoAmerica fans. It's time for another episode of Off Track with Carruthers and Bice. You'll laugh, you'll cry, and you may even learn something from this unlikely pair and their special guest. The mic is yours, Paul and Sean.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are listening to our podcast. This is Off Track with Paul Carruthers and Sean Bice. It's our weekly MotoAmerica podcast. We talk to all different kinds of people in our paddock, whether that be riders, mechanics, crew chiefs, team managers. We have somebody a little different this afternoon on the show. And first of all, let me introduce my cohort, Sean Bice, who's in Ohio. I'm in Southern California, so we're a long ways apart, but our hearts beat together and we almost feel like we're holding hands here. But how are you today, Sean?
I'm doing well, and now I'm all misty-eyed. You talking about two hearts beat as one, or?
Yeah, I don't know where that came from, but
I'll
try to make it not come back.
No, it's beautiful. It's poetic.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk about the guests we have today. I mean, you're right. We have had some interesting guests on lately, and we've kind of run the gamut. You know, we've had riders, we've had crew chiefs, we've had team owners, and today we're going to be talking to Tom Halverson. And Tom, for one thing, is, to me, one of the coolest guys I know and had a pleasure to know. He's been with Yamaha for since 1987, and, you know, I've known him since about 1991, but thing about Tom that's awesome and makes him cool, a couple things. One of them is he used to look like Kevin Cronin back when Kevin had that leaping fro when he was with the REO Speedwagon. Kevin's gone to the blonde hair and shorter, and Tom, which he's also known as Halvey, by the way, Halvey does not have that crazy blonde hair that Kevin Cronin has. He also, here's a real obscure reference. He also looked a little bit like Fee Waybill from the Tubes. So for you young kids out there,
where do you come up with this crap?
You know how I am with this crap. I mean, it just flows out of me. But speaking of trivia, I actually took the time, and from the top of my head to the bottom of my head, I guess, I put down a list of all the road racers that Tom has worked with. And the list is a lot longer than this because, as we'll talk to Tom about it, he's worked directly with riders he's been embedded with the teams with these riders that I'm going to name. But he's also been involved with essentially every road racer that's raced a Yamaha road racing bike since probably the FCR 600 back in '89, and even before that with guys like Rich Arnez, who was on a FCR 750R back in the day. But so let me read this, and it's kind of in a particular order, but I might have some out of place. So David Sadowski, Jamie James, Larry Schwartzbach, Thomas Stevens, who works for us now, Colin Edwards, who we had on a few weeks ago, Tom Kipp, one of my favorite riders, Rich Oliver, Eddie Lawson, everybody knows four-time Eddie, Scott Russell, Mr. Daytona, of course, Jamie Hacking, Jason DeSalvo, both Anthony Gober and Aaron Gober, as well as their countryman and Paul's countryman, Damon Buckmaster, both Bostroms, Eric and Ben, Josh Herron, Chris Clark, Tommy Aquino, Garrett Gerloff, who's now in World Superbike, of course, Tommy Hayden, JD Beach, Josh Hayes, and Cameron Beaubier. And then this year, he's going to be working directly with Jake Gagne, who he's worked with in the past. So that is an absolute who's who of road racers from, you know, back in the Vance and Hines days that I recall to now. And one other quick thing I want to say about Tom, who's in his car right now, and he's on his phone because with a lot of our guests, the reception seems to be best in the car. The other thing that Tom has a particular talent of doing, besides being a Stevie Ray Vaughan fan, he's an excellent guitarist. And in the traffic jams on the way to work at Yamaha, he actually plays a guitar on the way to work. So let's bring Tom in. I don't think I've ever done quite the guest introduction I did for you, Tom. So welcome. Thanks for coming on our podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Quite a overwhelming introduction for sure. I'm not sure about the Fee Waybill reference, but I don't know. I'll take it.
I just don't want to be in front of you when you're playing guitar in traffic.
Oh, he's good at it. Yeah.
Yeah, I got
Go
it
ahead,
down.
Tom.
I got it down.
All right, good. I don't want to be rear-ended.
Nope, that's when I'm at my safest, actually.
Good.
So, Tom, you've been Mr. Road Race for Yamaha for a long time. Long time worked with Keith McCarty, race director, and all these riders that you've worked with over the years. It's a pretty incredible list in what they've accomplished, and it's a huge testament to you. I mean, I've always felt like you have a quiet demeanor, but a quiet confidence, and have kind of been the glue that's held road racing with Yamaha together all these years. Pretty special to work with all those riders, wouldn't you say?
Incredibly special for sure. I don't look back too often because I'm always trying to look forward. But when I do look back and look over my career and just think of all those incredible people I've worked with and everything I've learned from them and gleaned from them is definitely a real special thing for me for sure.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I was daydreaming. I was trying to listen to his guitar. Hey, Tom,
I get fired up.
I think your background is different in the fact that you have obviously a managerial role with Yamaha, and you have for quite a while, but you also have a mechanical background. How did that start?
In high school, I went to work for a little motorcycle shop in the San Fernando Valley named Al Baker's R&D. I was racing motocross and got my dream job there, building expansion chambers from sheet metal, and kind of started from there and built expansion chambers, did machining, started on suspension work, and really learned a lot about the mechanics of motocross bikes, and that kind of led into being a privateer motocross mechanic to a professional motocross mechanic, and I did that for about 11 years. So, I had a lot of great riders in that sport as well. Met a lot of great people and learned a lot from them, and that was another part of my life that was a really big influence on who I am today for sure.
At the time, did you plan on just staying with motocross? I mean, how did you make that transition?
Yeah, I really did. I'd been on the motocross circuit for quite a while, and it's a pretty brutal schedule, especially, in the later years, you're doing the supercross and the motocross and doing exhibition races. It's pretty much, a full year calendar. So I went to Yamaha to be with their competition support program to work with younger riders and to kind of get away from that kind of a schedule, and which was really fun. That's where I met Colin Edwards when he was just a little kid, and his father. But one day an engineer came up to me
talk
that
about that story. I'm sorry, Tom. Talk about that story because talk about the thing with Colin Edwards, because we had Colin on a few weeks ago, and I made a point of talking to him about how you really got him started. Well, you were involved with him and when he raced motocross, but really got him started in road racing. Tell us that story from your perspective a little bit.
I just remember I was at Atlanta and I was just kind of learning road racing and learning the procedures and the riders and kind of scouting at the same time. And it was the same time when I was looking, where Yamaha had me looking at, partnering with something like a Yoshima or a Suzuki, but, for Yamaha, kind of where the Vance Hines thing eventually led to. But I was at Road Atlanta and I saw this kid and his dad, hanging on the fence watching, and went over and it was Colin. And we struck up a conversation. I was surprised he was there. He was surprised I was there. And he said, "Yeah, I'm thinking of getting into road racing. My friend's got a couple bikes and I'm really fast at it. And, do you have any suggestions?" And, the only thing, not the only thing, but one of the things I'd learned at the time was, I thought the TZ was a great platform for his age with a two-stroke experience to start with. So I kind of said, "Hey, you probably should get on board with one of these TZ 250s, see if you can get one of these. And, who knows, if you need any help, let me know." And, before you know it, he found someone that had a TZ and some other bikes, and he kind of went from there. But that was, quite a chance meeting there at that point. And hopefully I gave him a little bit good advice, and, I'm pretty confident I did.
Yeah, you did. I mean, he very vividly talked about when he started out and worked with you on it and stuff, and how, you guys had that connection before. And the thing that it was interesting, we had asked him just the basics of going from, sticking your leg out on a motocross bike to getting your knee down. And it's a little bit, there's obviously some learning involved there, but he claims that it was never any kind of an issue for him. He went from one to the other, made the transition pretty quickly. When you first saw him, he had, of course, I know you remember that one Biketoberfest when he had all those wins and he had that one Honda RC30 and raced some other guys' bikes.
Yep.
You were already working with him at that point, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was that kind of showed me that he was going to be, the next big guy. He was so confident and he was having so much fun and he looked so good on the track and he could ride any different kind of bike. And just having a great time. And as usual, his dad never put any pressure on him from the beginning of his career. And they kept it fun and kept it light and going to that. He's going to definitely go places. And then soon after was the epic year with him and Kenny Jr. battling it out and won that 250 championship. And from there he really just took off.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Let's talk a little bit about you've obviously had I would imagine, a different sort of off season this year. The team has moved to the Attack team, and I know you're still heavily involved. Tell us a little bit about what your off season has looked like compared to past years. Or am I wrong? Has it just been pretty fluid as always?
No, it's been much different for sure. My title's changed, so I'm assistant department manager now for Yamaha Racing under Jim Roach. We are both taking over from Keith McCarty and Mike Guerra, some very, very big shoes to fill. But that transition is happening during this year. They're still both here at Yamaha for the remainder of this year. But, my main job early on was to do this transition from a factory in-house team to the Attack Performance team. And, basically in this business environment, you just kind of have to try to do more with less. And even worldwide, Superbike, the PADA team, for example, they went with an outside team to run their factory supported team. So we kind of mirrored that. So doing this with Attack, I think, was a really good move. We've been talking to Richard about it for a while, and I've just since been helping him to get up to speed and make sure he has the tools that he needs to get started, the information he needed. He took our tools. We've leased him our truck. He's got all our information and anything else we could have helped him to hit the ground running. We've really tried to help him with. So that's been quite a process for the last few months. I'm sure once we hit the ground at Barbara and then the first race, second race, he's going to be able to take this thing 99%, on his own, and it'll just be a little bit of oversight from Yamaha to make sure it's going the way that, we both want it to. But it's definitely been different, and, there's a little bit pulls at your heartstrings because I've been doing this in-house with such a great group of guys for so long. It's been a little bit hard for sure, but I'm really confident that in the end, this team is going to be as competitive or more than what we were, the last 10 years.
It seems to be that this will be the model going forward, don't you think? I mean, as far as how race teams are run?
Probably for a while. Everything goes in cycles, but I think for a while it will probably be like this. Hopefully it'll be at least like this. It's really nice for the factory to have, a top level team, but still have the top level riders getting paid what they should be getting paid and bonuses they should be earning, and keep with all the good guys in the industry, because we have some great contractors that went from us over to Richard and combined them with some great people he had over there. So it's I think it's the way of the future for a while for sure.
Did a lot of the crew end up going?
Yeah, most of the contractors we had, Glenn Grenfell, Mike Canfield, Lee Vaughn, and Paul St. Clair went over there. Those were most of the contractors we had, and they, teamed up with, Walker Jemison, Will Morton, Fernando Cruz, and Roy Davis over at Attack's place. So pretty much all the main guys on both sides are kind of joining forces on this. So it's pretty exciting.
Sean, go ahead. I know you're biting your tongue over there, Sean. So start talking.
Yeah, well, a highly experienced team there for sure. I mean, you can definitely tell with that. You had mentioned Jim Roach and that you're assistant to him, and I did want to mention for the audience that Jim used to be the crew chief for Josh Hayes. I'm sure a lot of you know that, but so Jim Roach has moved up to that in that capacity, and now Tom is kind of his assistant in there, and they've been working together a long time. Tom, I want to ask you about the way it's evolved for this year. Does it feel a little bit like it's history repeating itself? Because I remember distinctly for the first time meeting you in 1990 at New Hampshire International Speedway, the first year that it went from Breyer Motorsports to Loudon. You were one of the guys wearing those magenta, yellow, and black team shirts. And I couldn't tell that you were a Yamaha guy. I thought you were Vance and Hines. I didn't know. I mean, of course, Jim Leonard was there. He was Vance and Hines. It took me a little while to realize that you and I think Larry Griffiths, who was there, were actually Yamaha employees because you were so embedded with the team. So does this model that is happening now with the team feel a little bit like it was back then?
Yeah, it's very, very close to the same. Very close. I was really, really close to that whole Vance and Hines effort that we started, and along with being the coordinator on the Yamaha side, which was it can be a lot of work. I also did suspension work with them. I did some just chassis setup stuff with them. I worked very closely with the riders, and I was very, very much entrenched in that. I probably won't be as entrenched in that as in the Attack thing as that, but it is very similar for sure, especially at the beginning here.
Well, it's funny. You think back to those days, and this is the point I'm trying to make with this, is back then we thought of the Vance and Hines Yamaha team as the factory Yamaha team. We thought of Muzzy Kawasaki as the factory Kawasaki team. All of those teams were working with a partner like Attack, like Westby Racing, like Team Hammer. It's always been involved that way. It was a little bit seamless. So I know in recent years, Yamaha's made a point of saying Yamaha Factory Racing, but the factory racing part of it is kind of embedded into this team because certainly Cameron and Jake Gagne are kind of considered to be Yamaha people, not necessarily Attack Performance people. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct. Yep, we're still maintaining kind of the control of that part of it, and it is an expensive element of that. So that's one of the main things that we're doing to make sure this thing is successful, for sure. The thing we don't have out there, which is really a bummer, is Yoshimura. You're talking about sport teams like that. They were the standard for me. And without a great opponent, there really is no victory. And I think that's what's made victory for us the last several years so special, is because that team I always looked at as being the best and the most solid, and to beat those guys was really, really incredible. So I'm definitely going to really miss that part of it for sure as well.
How difficult of a decision was it for the second rider this year? I mean, Cameron was a no-brainer, obviously, but bringing Jake Gagne into the team, was there a big decision there, or did that come pretty easy?
I think it came pretty easy looking around at who was there, and we've always talked about Yamaha family, and we really we have the wall of champions, and we really respect all those champions that are on that wall. And Jake's up on there twice. With a 600 Super Sport Championship and a Super Stock 1000 Championship, and that one came on the 15R1. So I think all the pieces just kind of fit. It just kind of made sense. So it really wasn't that difficult a decision for us. Definitely some other great riders out there that we considered, but all in all, that's I think we made a good choice with Jake for sure.
Yeah, and it's funny, when we had Jake on a few weeks ago, you could feel there was a comfort factor there that he knows you guys, and knows the bike and has won on it before. So, and obviously knows Cameron well and is good friends with him too. You had mentioned about with Vance and Hines when you did suspension, and I know with you over the years, I think, well, let me just say, on a team, there is a fair amount of overlap. It seems like some people do some different tasks. Everybody kind of chips in. But you've had interesting roles throughout your career that have kind of gone beyond what your title is. You mentioned you've done suspension. I know you've done chassis. You've been a crew chief from time to time. Is there anything on the team that I think you've probably had every role? I know you used to make the coffee too, so, the espresso or whatever.
Oh, jeez.
He
was the only one that knew how to use the machine.
Or could fix it when it broke. It broke often.
But talk about these multiple roles that you had, and tell. Is there one that you hold kind of more near and dear to your heart in terms of what you were doing on the team?
Well, back even when I was a motocross mechanic and we were traveling around box fans all year, and we did our own suspension, built our own engines, built our own bikes, and you were kind of out there on your own. The truck was going to break down. You knew it at some point, and driving from A to B, from Atlanta to Seattle or something crazy like that in a week, you learned a lot about mechanical stuff, and it always intrigued me. But the one piece that was missing was, you were always watching the bike going around the track and wondering how fast is that shock really moving, how much stroke is it actually using, what's the balance of the bike at, where is it actually at. And when data acquisition site kind of came around, that was like the holy grail for me. And I remember Steve Dirksen of Vance and Hines had one of the first and earliest systems of data acquisition that I knew about, and I was exposed to that, and that just really lit me up. So I think of all the things at first, that's what really, really turned me on, was actually seeing, okay, how fast the shock's moving, what's the, how's the balance of the bike going into the corner, where's the suspension stroke going into the corner, mid of the corner, out of the corner. And then from there, learning about, spring weights and real weights and all this kind of stuff and how it relates to the data. And it was just a whole big thing opened up for me that I'd never been exposed to. And that really drove me for a lot of years trying to get my head around that and learn that well. And, I think that also helped, a lot in, my confidence in working with riders or teams, and, looking at data was really a big part of it.
Tom, in seeing your career and seeing you do all these things and thinking about all the riders that you worked with, it's probably a situation like with you. I know how dogs are special to you, and you have more than one dog and don't have maybe you do have a favorite one, but maybe won't want to admit it. But it's like children or maybe
grand. He should be okay.
What's that?
The dog's not listening. He should be okay.
I know, but how I worry about dogs so much. You've worked with so many riders. Are there any that stand out to you, or they're a little more special, or that mean something to you? I'm sure, obviously, Josh Hayes does, being a 4-time champion, and probably Cameron too. But you think back to all, Colin, you mentioned. You probably can't pinpoint one or two, but is that a possibility to call out somebody specifically?
Colin and I got to be excellent friends for a long time. We'd spend New Year's together. We'd go up to Jackson Hole and go skiing, and those were just some great times. We were very close for a lot of years, and we were definitely really close, and definitely still a good friend. Jamie James, I got very close with, and is a really great guy and a great person. It really is very hard to isolate some, but in the later years, Josh was just an incredible individual, as well as Cam is. And they're both very different, but I'm very endeared to both of them and really respect them and what they've done and who they are as people as well. So those would probably be maybe the top 4, but again, I was close with Thomas Stevens, and there's so many guys that you mentioned. They were all
Tom Kipp, of course. I know you love Tom Kipp.
Tom Kipp, of course. Yeah, Tom and I poured over data for hours and hours and hours at the racetrack, and got into a lot of interesting conversations about all kinds of stuff. But another outstanding individual for sure. I just can't say enough about any of them.
It's amazing the riders that you've worked with, and it's been interesting the way, if you isolate or speak about Superbike, it's been interesting with Yamaha and Superbike, because of course Superbike came into being around the middle of the 80s, and I mentioned Rich Arnez, how he had that win, and I'm sure you had involvement with him or knew of him. But then Vance and Hines came along, and Thomas Stevens won the championship in 91. There was a time period there where Yamaha wasn't involved in Superbike, but got back into it after doing Formula Extreme. Can you talk about kind of the evolution from Superbike, how the development of the R1 happened, and you got out of Superbike and went back into it? Can you explain that a little bit to us?
There was the years when Yamaha only made a 750 and not really 1000 was competitive, and there was, Ducati 1000 was out of there, and just decisions were made to not be in Superbike, which I think were good, and to focus on things that we could be good about, and developing a team that we could grow to be a Superbike team when we did get a bike that was would be competitive. And that pretty much happened for us. I think really we raced 2007, 2008, with Ben and Eric, but it was really on more of a factory-based machines. But the bike for us was the 2009 R1 that kind of came along, and for whatever reason, it was fourth in all the magazine tests. But Josh Hayes got in that thing and really saw something in it. And as a team, we took that thing from a stock bike to a race-winning bike in a pretty short amount of time. It seemed like long, but you look back in history, it was actually a pretty short amount of time and won a lot of championships with it. And I think we all learned quite a bit from that. And I don't think any of that would have happened like it did if it wasn't for Josh kind of bringing us all the way back to basics and working from the stock bike up to, something that was, a race winning machine. Then in 2015, when we got that bike, it was just incredible out of the crate. And, although it wasn't as near and dear to Josh's heart when he first rode it, it fit Cam like a glove. And he loved that bike from the first time we tested it. And so those from 2009 to 2015, those two bikes were, for sure the ones that turned the Superbike thing around from us and put us back on the map. And, I can't, looking back at all the championships we won, it's really hard to believe, but especially like I said, racing against some of the best riders and the best team in the paddock.
I've told you this before, Tom. You probably remember, but the R1 it's incredible, obviously. And when it came into being in 98, but certainly 2009 with Josh riding the bike and what was done with that bike. But the one I'll tell you, the bike I've always been such a huge fan of was that YZF R7 with Anthony Gobert riding it, or even Rich Oliver. I'll never forget when you guys uncrated that thing at Road Atlanta, and Rich was, I think, fastest in one of the first sessions or something. And I just loved the way that bike looked for a 750 anyway. Was that a special bike to you, or just kind of like the other ones?
Yeah, for sure. It was a beautiful bike out of the box. I mean, the bikes are still, really cool looking, but it was, I don't know, we had incredible success with that very early on, and then it kind of went away. But
Yeah.
especially with Rich, I think we were on the podium in our first or second race on that bike, and Anthony had definitely some good success on it. So yeah, I probably shouldn't have left that one out because that was a really cool bike. The YZF 750 SP was a good bike, but as far as modern day sport bikes, the last two, and I want to mention too Garrett Gerloff, because him and I got along really well last year and got to know each other a lot better. And just want to give him kudos for going over to Europe and racing with the world's best over there this year.
Boy, it sure did click for him last year. Paul and I have talked about this a bunch. We likened it, and you can speak to this. We likened it to that in '94 when Colin Edwards went on that run, starting at, I believe it was Mid Ohio, and he had like those wins. It seemed like he was unstoppable and led to World Superbike. And obviously Garrett did the same thing this past year. Did you feel that deja vu a little bit?
A little bit for sure. And and Garrett wouldn't have. Cameron wouldn't have won that championship if Garrett hadn't performed like that at the end of the year. So that just made this whole championship probably the most special one I've ever been involved with. But for Garrett, we started the year out with really just trying to get him confident on the bike, because his first year was a little bit, I shouldn't say scary for him, but he was a little bit unsure about the way the bike was going to handle, and the bike itself was a little bit unstable, and he just couldn't ride it the way he could the 600. So we really focused on getting him comfortable, maybe slowing the bike down, slowing the setup down a little bit till he was comfortable, then slowly ramping it up. And gosh, by mid-season, he was just firing on all cylinders. And, by the end of the year, he was just incredible results. And it's, again, that confidence you see and that, lack of pressure that they're putting on themselves, and the team's clicking, everything's clicking. And, at the end of the season, to have him perform like that and really help Cameron with the championship was just an incredible accomplishment for all of us.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I recall Cameron did his first Superbike test was at NOLA, right after the national.
Yeah, I think he rode it before. He rode it in stock format. I think at Chuckwalla, him and I went out there when it was just basically a stock bike, and even then, just completely stock with some tires on it. He was like, "This bike is, it fits me like a glove," and he was just super stoked on it. Like I said, Josh didn't have the same feeling, but for Cameron, that was kind of the first one. Then, yeah, the Nova thing was, I think, the second time.
Well, because I remember talking to Josh after that test, and that's when Josh said, like, "Oh man, this kid I think is going to be a little trouble for me." And did you see that right away as well?
Yeah, for sure. Cameron's an incredibly talented kid. And we knew when he was on that Superbike, and he was confident and could ride it like he could with the 600, and really let his talent come out on the racetrack on that bike, that he was going to be a serious contender, and that Josh was going to have a much more difficult time for sure. Cameron does stuff on the motorcycle that even Josh can't believe he does, and he'll come out and tell you that. He's a very talented kid for sure.
Now, continuing on this theme of the riders, I mean, if, as you well know, there, and you've even mentioned it, but I mean, they're very different. A lot of them are very different in different ways. But don't you think that they share some common traits? I mean, you would know this from working with them, but what are some of the things that you've noticed that they all have? I mean, there's things like confidence and feel, but I mean, can you add to that a little bit about what you've noticed they all tend to have in common?
Well, at the very base, I just call it like the 4Ds: desire, determination, dedication, and discipline. You have to have all four of those before you can really go anywhere. And if you miss one, you kind of miss the whole boat. But those guys, exude all of those things. They're super talented people, but they're able to focus on all those, four different things. And then confidence for sure comes into play as well when you get kind of under extreme conditions. But I think the thing they have too is making the best of a bad day, because you're always going to have that. And to be able to, really push to make the very best of that, they've all kind of had that same trait. All super talented. But yeah, like you say, they're all very different in their personality, and they probably take a different approach from a crew chief or the people that are downloading them and trying to get the information out of them. They all take something different to bring their confidence level up and to be happy at the racetrack and be confident in their team. And I think, a lot of the magic in the team is just learning that about those riders and really bringing it out of them every single weekend, no matter what happens. So that's another part that's great about the whole job.
Yeah, I bet.
Speaking of riders, Tom, let's talk about a rider that was very much aligned with the Yamaha brand, and you've known him since he was quite young, not riding for Yamaha anymore. And this rider certainly seems to me has changed, whether it's his style. There's something about those 4Ds you said maybe they've been increased, and it's, of course, I'm talking about Josh Herrin. He's a different rider than he was maybe even during that 2013 championship that he had. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, Josh has matured for sure. There's still the old Josh in there, but he's definitely matured. And he's another rider that I've got a lot of history with, and that's really a great kid. And he can definitely be a loose cannon, and say what's on his mind, and which I like that and I respect that. And but again, you have to be at a certain point. You have to be disciplined, and you have to put in the work, and you have to make the best of the bad times. And I think Josh has learned how to do that. And because at the end of the year, every single point matters, and your attitude matters from the racing organization to the fans. And he's become one of the best guys at that, with social media and working with the fans. And I really got to give him kudos for probably being the top guy in the paddock as far as that goes. So yeah, another for sure great guy.
Have you seen an evolution in the riders regarding their training regimen too? It seems, I mean, I think about, I don't know, Jamie James, Thomas Stevens. I mean, they were always fit. Colin too. But then you have Josh Hayes, who would ride like 200 miles on a bicycle during the week or something. It just seems like training, fitness, nutrition, and all that stuff have really increased a lot throughout the evolution of the sport, and certainly these riders. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. In this modern era, especially with the since the internet, there's so much information out there. In the past, it was very easy to not train it too enough, and it was very easy to overtrain and not hit your peak on the weekend. But with the advent of trainers and nutrition and all these things that are available to almost everybody, it's much easier to hit the mark. And if you put in the work to be at the very best you can be, and to really hit your peak when you're at the race weekend. But there's a lot to it. In the past, for sure, there was a lot of mystery to it, but now it's especially if I have a good trainer like the motocross guys, it's just paramount. Every one of them has a trainer, and it's very scientific. And those guys are racing 17 weeks of Supercross in a row, just a brutal, competitive, high pressure environment. And for sure, the training has come a long, long ways from where it used to be. Absolutely.
Mm.
All right. Speaking of loose cannons, was Anthony Gobert the loosest cannon you've dealt with?
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the most talented guys, as far as raw talent, probably one of the most talented guys. He could come back and tell you stuff about the motorcycle it was doing, and you go and look at the data, and it's spot on. And
Wow.
it was just an incredible feel. Super talented guy. You get the most out of the bike every single time he's on the track. Getting to show up sometimes was difficult. Um, it pretty much took Keith and I, constant. I shouldn't say supervision because we tried to make it a friendly thing, but to tell him what was at stake and to tell him what we had invested in him and the faith we had in him. But it was pretty much constantly remind him to be disciplined and to really show up and do the work and be in shape. And towards the end there, he was having a great run. He ended up breaking his leg at Atlanta. I think he would have a really, really great year that year. But you know, before that, after that year, I saw some stuff in bars happen and things that people would barely believe. But again, the environment wasn't as strict back then, and as PC, and Anthony was definitely a wild child, and people loved him because of it. Though he had a great following, and probably still to this day he's what a rider you remember because of that.
Yeah. Well, and I've heard this said many times that was probably Anthony Gobert's best time of his period of his life in terms of his focus in his racecraft. And we always said, it was you and Keith that kept him on the straight and narrow with that and really got a lot out of him. I want to ask you about, I think it was probably 1999, but it was the race at MotoAmerica when he in the wet, and he came from behind and won that race. Do you know how he did that? I mean, I don't get that.
I didn't get it either. To go that much faster than the best riders in the country was just saying, yeah, how do you do that? I don't know. Just like I think all his incredible feel, he could just sense traction and sense what the road was doing so much more precisely than a lot of guys. It just really helped him in the wet. I mean, he was just incredible in the wet. If he wanted to go, he was unstoppable.
And to emphasize, there was that your traction control was your right wrist, right? There was no electronic control on that bike. He had to do it himself,
no electronic control, and he didn't want to change the setup. He wanted to ride the thing exactly like it was in the dry because he knew how it was going to react, and he knew how he just wanted to be on the bike that he knew and make the very best of it and use the natural talent he had, and he made it work.
That's incredible. I want to ask you about something else, Tom. You and I have talked about this a bunch of times, enough so that I wanted you to discuss it a little bit. For people, we have a lot of fans that listen in who are historians of our sport, which means, of course, they're a little bit older, like you and Paul and I. So they have that understanding. Yeah, we all clear our throat. But I want to ask you about the year that Jamie James almost won that championship. Everybody points at the last round in a mechanical issue that he had, but it really wasn't that. Are you able to tell us that story a little bit, or would you please tell us that story?
Well, that was probably one of the things that hurt me the most in this whole business was that ruling by the AMA referee at the time. I won't mention his name, but I will never ever forget it. And Jamie was just coming. I think it was Canada corner, and made a pass on Pascal Picot. And where he was focusing, there's no way that he could have seen a yellow flag that was flying. I think up above turn one. No way possible. But there was a yellow flag waving. He didn't see it. Um, there was plenty of time for him to safely go through there and Pascal. But the guy called it by the letter of law, didn't want to listen to any reason, and pretty much just took a bunch of points away, and that's really lost the championship for us. But for one guy that's kind of a part-time guy to be at the track and make that call all by himself without listening to anybody else's opinion. I mean, I remember sitting up, Rich Oliver came down, I was sitting up, and he said, I was sitting up on that hill, I was on that bike with Jamie, I know where he was looking, there's no way you could have seen that flag. They didn't want to listen to any of that. They just took those points away from him and took that championship away that we really should have had. So that of everything that hurts that I've done in road racing, that was probably the biggest thing. Felt really bad for the team and for Jamie, and he really deserved it that year. It did come down to the last race, and we still could have got it done, but we didn't. But it was really lost at MotoAmerica in that event.
I'm a firm believer in it being cathartic to talk about it, by the way, Tom. So I know I've asked you that one a few times. And I think I'm just trying to ease your pain more than you'll relive it. But the point about it is, at the time, I mean, I know it was obviously a pivotal moment, but there was still the season left to run. It just turned out that the way things happened, he almost won it in that last round. And of course, if that wouldn't have happened earlier in the season, he would have won the championship. But as it worked out, it was just so close, right? And I mean, you didn't, at the time when it happened, you didn't think, well, that's the championship, it's over at that point, right? There was still a season left to go. Or did you think that?
I knew it hurt us. I for sure. Even last year with Cameron, you get a bunch of points behind. You never ever give up, and you always see, if there's enough points in the table to get that championship, then you still have hope and you still keep pushing, and no matter what, you keep going. So, yeah, you're right. We weren't focused on that, throwing the balance in the championship at the time. But, of course, at the end, when you think back on it, it makes you so angry.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well,
thanks for making his day so nice, Sean.
Yeah. I know. Well, I don't want to end it on that note, but like I said, I think there's catharsis there. So I'm doing it for you, Tom.
So, I appreciate that.
Yeah. I have my own. But before we wrap up, I do want to bring up one more thing. I mentioned at the top that you're one of the coolest guys, if not the coolest guy I've ever known. And one of the reasons you are that way is one of the coolest, if not the coolest actors, and my favorite actor I've ever known was Steve McQueen. And I have to ask you about, you had some brush with him at some point in your career, or actually when you were younger, I should say, not in your career. Can you tell us about that just to kind of wrap it up?
Yeah, my father was a plumber. He worked in Santa Monica, a place called O'Brien Plumbing, and he was a really good-looking guy, very, well-spoken, nice guy. And they would send him out to some of their higher-profile clients in Bel Air, Westwood, Hollywood, and one of them happened to be Steve McQueen. My dad was just getting us into motorcycle riding, and him and Steve got into a conversation about that and invited my dad and his kids up to a little secret track that he had. And we showed up in our little van and got to ride, for the afternoon with Steve McQueen and his son Chad. And that was really, at the time, I was more enamored with Chad because the kid was so good at such an early age. Then, really kind of hanging out with Steve McQueen. It didn't really hit me till, a long time after how special that was. But he was, just an icon. But we would see him at Indian Dunes with Ali McGraw and park next to him and just head out into, sand-washed Indian Dunes and ride around. And he was just a normal guy out riding a motorcycle. So, that was really, really cool. But there's so many other high-profile movie stars that I met back in that period through my dad that it was, I got exposed to a lot of famous and ultra-rich people at a very, very young age. But that one was probably the most special.
That's so cool. And the funny thing, Chad is close to our age. I mean, I think, wasn't he maybe a little younger than you at that time? Or it still is, so. Obviously.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I didn't really had any contact with him afterwards, but besides seeing me in Indian Dunes just ripping around the main bike track there and making me look like an idiot, but you're definitely a talented kid for sure.
That's just an amazing story. So I thought it'd be good to wrap it up with that one. So, Paul, did you know that story? Did you know the story?
I had never heard that story, but that's very cool. And you're lucky boy, Tom, to get to do that. That's something you'll always remember.
Yeah,
but anyways, you guys, I appreciate you spending some time with us. Tom, I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks next week at the test.
Yeah, I look forward to it too, for sure.
And I guarantee you have a nice little season there with Attack. I think it'll be a little bit different for you, but you've gone through some different things and you always react well to it all. So I expect the same this year. And Sean, thanks for joining and putting Tom on the hot spot and making him talk about things he didn't want to talk about, and all in the name of counseling, which I'm not sure that worked, but hopefully he gets in his car and plays the car on the way home. There you go. Anyway, guys, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. Hey, Paul, before we before we cut it off, let's throw in a little thing about I'm gonna tell everybody to make sure they get their MotoAmerica Live Plus subscription to our streaming service. With the test next week, it won't be long before the season starts, and of course, there's race tickets too. Paul, do you want to mention anything about that? Or
I think you just nailed it. But yeah, I think
okay, get your race.
We obviously have there's obviously all these races are being canceled and stuff, and it's a bad situation at this point in time with Dorna. But I'm very confident that COTA will go ahead, and that'll be our first Superbike round of the year. And then we follow that up right away with Road Atlanta and all of our races. So yeah, the season promises to be a good one, and anybody that feels so inclined needs to get those tickets and get them while they're cheaper than the day of the event. And like you said, the Live Plus is obviously important for those people who can't be at each race. It gives them an opportunity to feel like they're there because we literally show everything that happens the entire weekend on MotoAmerica Live Plus. So thanks for reminding me on that and for reminding the fans. But we'll talk to you guys soon.